All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the TED Talk. I promise I'm going to go back to interviewing players and coaches and analysts. As you can tell, I am a man of my word. So after Anders, we have Tech Girl coming up. Another person from the broadcast talent scene in Counter-Strike. But of course, it's an absolute pleasure, and I'm really excited for this conversation. Sam, first of all, I wanted to give you a shout out in front of everybody else. I already did that off camera, but people in the esports industry, especially in Counter-Strike, I don't know how it is for other games, they hate recording any type of content before, let's say, 4 p.m., 5 p.m. They can't go up. For them, an early morning is 1 p.m. You agreed to record at 10 a.m. Central European time, for which I want to tell you you're an OG, and I appreciate it. But yeah, how are
Thank
you
you. I
doing?
mean, I've got a rehearsal at like midday, right?
Yeah.
So that was why we needed to record now because the evening wouldn't work. And then I realized that because I was recording this now, I would have to wake up and go to gym at like 8 a.m. So I
Mm,
did that. So I'll probably be cursing you a little bit later and not be too happy at about 8, 9 p.m. But
okay.
we do it, right? I commit, like, I'm okay with any time. I've just sort of accepted that you make yourself available when you have to make yourself available, right?
Yeah, that's esports in a nutshell, pretty much. And I can
Pretty much.
the life hack for the 8 p.m. if you gotta record something, you just go for a 1 hour nap, then you get another coffee, and you're good to go. Or you
Sure.
go for a run. You've been to the gym already. Doesn't mean you can't go a second time and do something else. But yeah,
I'm
just
definitely not going
to
a second time, friend.
yeah. Um, so how things go usually here, we're gonna start it off the same way that we started off a couple days ago with Anders and with some of the other guests. We're gonna have a bit of a conversation about you. So first of all, just to clarify for anyone that might not know, you yourself are a content grinder, but most of the time you talk about external things and not about yourself as a person, right? You talk about, you have a couple series, you have Feed the Trolls with Thorin, you have Sell Me This Pro with Brandon. So you're talking about a lot of Counter Strike, and you're talking about a lot of things. But now we're gonna interview the interviewee, pretty much, or the interviewer. Yeah. So we're gonna start it off with the very beginning. First of all, how did you get into gaming? What was your first introduction to video games in general?
So my dad was always like a little bit of a techie and was always playing games. So I think from a young age we had a PC actually. So it started with he used to play like we had Diablo. So funny enough,
Mm-hmm.
Diablo was the game we weren't allowed to even watch, which is so odd because then he let us play Doom with him. So how he decided Diablo was a problem and Doom wasn't, I've never understood. And
Because it's
he's
not
passed away.
kids
So
friendly.
I mean, Doom's not kid friendly either, but he
Yeah,
had no
that's
problem with me. I used to sit on his lap and hit spacebar to jump. He used to tell me when to hit spacebar.
right.
How Doom was fine, but he'd always be like, we weren't allowed Diablo. But then he got us Mortal Kombat 3, so we played that for a bit. Command
Yeah.
and Conquer, Age of Empires, and then we got these kid-friendly games, my brother and I, called Eagle Eye Mysteries. And the other day, I actually asked a bunch of people online if they'd heard of it, and no one had. But Eagle Eye Mysteries was damn cool. It was like this brother
Okay.
and sister pair and then they solved mysteries. And my brother and I just played it all the time, again and again and again. But that was basically how we started. Then we got a Sega, so we were playing a bit of those. So it was like gaming was just always kind of part of our family, because
Mm-hmm.
our dad was just super. He used to build Meccano for fun. Like my dad was super nerdy.
Okay.
And then as time went on, my brother got super into Dota, and became quite competitive. And I suppose that's
Mm-hmm.
where like my introduction to esports started was about then, which is normally the story I tell when people ask. Like I'll be like, oh, my brother played, and then I got into it from there. But we were playing games from when we were very little.
So it was kind of like a family activity for you from the very beginning. So you've always had some love to video games in a way. How is I I wonder about, because as I told you, I know very few actually about the gaming and esports scene in South Africa, and I guess it's the same case for a lot of people. But is it a really popular thing? Like, for example, in Denmark, I know a lot of the pro players started because their dads were going to internet cafes and playing 1.6, for example. Is gaming a part of the culture there as well? Is there a lot of people from older generations that actually are into video games?
So not PC gaming, which is kind
Okay.
of weird. Like I think PC gaming is pretty minimalistic. PlayStation is like everyone had a PlayStation growing up except us, because my dad was like, yeah, I have a computer instead. But like in South Africa, I think the PlayStation was something that was very common, and
Okay.
that's kind of if you speak to South Africans, they PlayStation and FIFA, those are the two things that come up the most.
Mm-hmm.
PC gaming itself and like PC games, not nearly as popular.
Okay. All right. Makes sense, I guess. I mean, to me it doesn't, because PC gaming is much better. But hey,
I don't get it either, but
people
you
are
know,
free to have a bad taste, right?
yeah.
So you started playing those games. How did you get into more, I guess, finding a liking for more competitive games? Because so far you've listed only story mode gaming, which, you know, it's a little bit more casual. When actually did you start thinking about working in whatever way, shape, or form, or getting involved with professional gaming, I guess, with esports? Was that on a really later period, or did you find out about that while you were still growing up?
As much okay, so to clarify, like Quake, kind of my dad was quite into Quake, so
Okay.
the competitive side of it, we knew about Quake. My brother then got into Dota. I'm really shit at games.
All right.
So for me, yeah, being competitive isn't really an option. I just like running around causing chaos. But I liked playing like team-based games and I like being
Yeah.
involved. I was just really bad. It's also really difficult when the people you're surrounded by are actually really good and competitive, because then all they do is tell you how rubbish you are. So that was kind of the relationship with my brother, which is it's chilled. It's chilled. But that was kind of my first introduction was his Dota, and then just like his mates always around at the house watching them play. If they weren't playing Dota, they started playing Counter-Strike, which is where the sort of interest in Counter-Strike came from. Because for me, I preferred shooting games. Dota just I still don't understand the flying magic elm tree hitting the fairy, like could not care.
It
CS
could be
was
worse. It
something
could be
that
Valorant, where you do all of that in an FPS game.
you know, so CS was kind of Counter-Strike grabbed my attention. I thought it was really easy to get into. I feel like as a player, you can kind of jump in right in the beginning and just play. And then as time goes on, you kind of understand the nuances a bit better. And that was where I fell in love with it. In terms of working in esports, it's just not a thing in South Africa,
Yeah.
right? So like no one was making money. There was like one LAN a year. But all I wanted to do is because my brother and his mates were like so invested in this. And then what ended up happening is a very big telecommunications company, government owned, just dropped like silly money, like hundreds of thousands of US dollars into this like one event. And they were
Okay.
going to do this like, and they paid all this money and they did this huge press launch and they flew out Redeye, who like they had an egg and it opened and everyone was like, there was Redeye,
Mm-hmm.
and all these journalists had no clue who that was. Like it was that type of vibe. And I remember one of my brother's really good friends running. He'd got a bit drunk on the free booze, in his defense, but running up to me and he was like, "This is it. Like we've made it. Like my dad is gonna see that this is it." Like, and at that point, I had kind of been dabbling a little bit in technology and journalism and media,
Okay.
not gaming, not esports. And I was
Sure.
just like, oh, this is super sad because like this kid thinks like I say kid, Ash is my friend, but Ash thinks that this is going to be like the big break. But I
Yeah.
know that tomorrow the media and the journalists they have for the free food and the goodie bag tomorrow they don't care about esports again,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then because of that I kind of got home like all enamored and was like I had a little blog and I wrote this blog post being like, from here on out I'm going to write about South African esports and here's why you should care about it. And then I started writing articles about South African esports. And maybe 1,000 people read them if I was lucky. But every week I wrote my articles. I've still got that blog. Like that blog post is still up. But that was kind of my thing of like, now you're going to care. And that was how I fell into esports, I suppose, because I just every week wrote a new story about South African esports. And that was the start.
So you are a competitive person. That to me screams a competitive person. You see something that is not right, and you're like, I will make it right. I will make you believe that it's right now, that I've made it right. But you mentioned something really interesting, which is actually I think maybe the even, for me at least, more interesting part of this conversation before we delve deeper into South African esports and why do you think the community there has some problems, or the scene has some problems. You mentioned you were into journalism and media work even before that. So I would assume that happens, that breakthrough of your mind just deciding it wants to do something with esports happens somewhere around your 20s, right? So what were you doing before that? How was high school life like, university maybe? What was the direction before you started being interested in esports? How did you end up being interested in journalism and media?
Horrible for me, just because I was like quite an outcast, quite nerdy. I think my interests were very different to
Okay.
most people. I wasn't sporty, I wasn't a girly's girl, so I struggled a bit with that. Went to university and then realized that there was like so many people who had the same interests as me, who watched the same movies that I did,
Mm.
who read the same books, who played the same games. I think university was a big one. And when I went to university, I studied journalism
Mm-hmm.
and I majored in politics because
Okay.
I really I was I had this strong belief through high school that I needed to be the voice for the people that didn't have a voice. And what I mean by that is I legitimately thought I was going to be a Sky News war reporter. I was going to
Okay.
go to like the worst places on earth and I was going to report on wars and I was going to make people care, and I really believed that was my calling. So I did 3 years of journalism, majoring in politics, and then ended up doing an honors degree part time. And while doing that honors degree, started working at a local youth radio station
Mm-hmm.
as a sub editor in the newsroom and a reporter. And my boss sent me out on my first ever big story. I was going to a riot and I was going to
Okay.
report on the riot. And as I got there, some of the rioters started shaking my car. I was in the vehicle and they started shaking it because they were obviously
Right.
mad and they were throwing stones. And I reversed my vehicle, left. And that was when I realized that I do not have the balls to be a news/war reporter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it. I don't like being scared. And that dream was dead. But what ended up happening is from there, one of the things that I kind of found I was able to do is, because I'd grown up with such a nerdy dad, is like I understand tech. So I found in the newsroom, like when tech stories came in, a lot of people didn't understand. So like if they
Mm-hmm.
were reading about like fiber or a new phone or whatever, they didn't really understand what it meant. And I found that I had the ability to like simplify the tech and explain it. And that kind of that became my niche. Like I started doing a lot of tech stories. But then I got really mad because I found tech in South Africa really boring, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a bunch of old men like just being boring. So I started a blog because I wanted to like I wanted to write about it in a way that I thought was funny and cool and like add a little bit of personality to it. By this stage, I'd left journalism because I'd realized I wasn't going to be a Sky News war reporter. And also, I found out how much they earned, which just seemed quite depressing.
Sure.
So I'd ended up going into, as everyone does, the corporate or overlords, and I ended up in an advertising company. So I was doing a lot of marketing and advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And then the blog was just my thing on the side to write.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, as time went on, I pivoted into writing about esports because I really just had a passion for building the local scene. Um, and I loved esports. Like I loved going to watch. I loved being involved in the teams. I loved the competitive elements of it, and I loved the game. So I just wanted to be able to share that with everyone else, which is I think kind of the thing we all want to do, is just like
Yeah.
find our people, for want of a better term, and like share our passions with them.
I think especially when you decide to be a broadcast talent, because I feel like if you're a player, it's a little bit different because you're chasing something that you yourself want to achieve, right? But especially when you're a broadcast talent, most of the time it kind of feels like it's about sharing, even if it's about yourself. You just wanna share the emotions and the drive that you have for something with other people, right? Make it even more exciting for them, and then get some of theirs, and it's a big energy exchange, I guess, in a good way. Um, that I'm still digesting the story with the I want to be going to wars and the riot and shaking the car and whatnot. But does that mean that you were in the first place incredibly interested in journalist work, and was writing something that you think you would have been doing even if it wasn't for esports? Because that actually reminds me of a conversation I had with Duncan, with Thorin, when I interviewed him, when we talked about getting into journalism, because he told me in general he was incredibly interested in just writing and getting inspirations, and learning how to richen up the vocabulary and all of that. So what was there, some authors, let's say, or some people working in medias across the world that actually influenced, or maybe I don't know, maybe gave you the idea that this is something that you want to be doing, or it's always been like that? You've always liked creating stuff like that. You've always liked writing articles and creating content.
So again, back to my parents, because I think that they had quite a big influence. So when we were growing up, like we could play games, that was on
Mm-hmm.
weekends, but in the week, my folks had this like really ridiculously hectic rule where you had to be in your bedroom by 8 p.m. And that
Sure.
rule lasted all the way up until I was 16. So
16.
16. You didn't
All
have to
right.
go to sleep. You just had to be in your bedroom.
Okay.
Like,
There's ways to get
and you could
around.
do whatever. Yeah, you could do whatever
Yeah.
the hell you wanted, but you needed to be in your bedroom. And one of the other things is from a young age, I think from the age of 5, and I was very lucky because they could financially do this. I understand most can't, but we didn't get a lot of like toys, right? Those were like reserved for birthdays and Christmas. But the one thing my folks never said no to is if we were like out at a store and we saw a book
Okay.
and we wanted a book, they
Yeah.
almost always bought us books.
Sure.
So and they took us to the library. Like back there, I mean, libraries are kind of dead now, but we were always taken to the library like once every 2 months, and like there was so many books in our house, and I became obsessed with reading, and that happened, I think, more so into high school, where I really didn't feel like I went to a very small school, and I didn't really like my people weren't there, so books and games were like the easiest way for me to like find what I suppose people that I felt were like me. So all I did
Sure.
was read. It was just like so much. And then obviously going to bed at 8 p.m. meant like all I really freaking did was read. So I just read so much growing up, and I loved the way other people could use words to kind of to elicit feeling from you and
Yeah.
share knowledge in a way. Like I loved that. And I think that was when I got into journalism. I think the easiest way to sum it up, because like I'm not a streamer. I do some content creation, but I don't like being the story.
Yeah.
I like telling stories. And the thing I like about telling stories is finding a way to create an emotion that you share with me. I think that's why I love my job now. Like, it's cool to be like, I'm super hyped about this team. How do I tell this story so that you can be just as hyped? Or
Yeah.
how do I make you just as angry as I am right now with like how shit Astralis is playing? Like stuff like that is cool. And that was just where it came from. And that's always been, I've always said this is like, I don't want to be the story. I don't want to be the streamer. I don't want to be the player. I want to be able to tell the story. And I want people to walk away and remember the story. I don't care if they don't remember me. I just want to I want them to remember the story we told and the way they felt.
That's really interesting. It really is interesting. I actually think it's a good thing when you are a broadcast talent, by the way, because my perception of the job is actually pretty similar. And yeah, I just find that incredibly wholesome. So you sound like a person that would one day, and that is you're gonna tell me if that's true, but that entire conversation about I don't want to be the story, I want to tell, I want to be the one telling the story. Uh, makes me find I guess some similarities between the way that I'm thinking about it as well. So you sound like the type of person that would one day just isolate himself and just start writing a book or something like a big science fiction series and be like, I don't want to talk to people. I just want to be alone. I want to live life. I want to enjoy. I want to write and I want to create. Is that something you could imagine yourself doing in the future?
Said if I could just sit in this room all day recording podcasts and writing, I would do that.
Yeah.
I love my job, but like I'm not adverse to just if I could just like feed the trolls for me. I was like, if I could just do that once a week and like write a book or whatever, I'd be happy. Um, obviously, I wouldn't be that happy because I wouldn't make enough money. And I do like nice things. But like, if I could,
You
that would
and
be like
seven
the dream
billion
job,
people on the world on the planet,
right?
I
So
guess.
like, I think that's like, I mean, I think that's cool. And the thing that I
Yeah.
love about esports though is like, I think that we are just a group of people that were kind of ignored growing up, right? Like we were kind
Sure.
of different to everyone else. We were interested in other things, and that's why that's why I love our little community. I can't imagine doing this for like rugby or football. I
Mhm.
love esports because it kind of feels like we're all in on a big secret that no one else is. Specifically with Counter-Strike, like I just feel like we have this little, like not even little, we have this massive community of people, and if anyone else comes in and looks at it, they don't get it, and I kind of like that. Like makes me feel cool.
It is cool. Yeah, I mean, it's something I don't often think about, by the way. But that was one of the main reasons that I fell in love with esports as well. I guess to some extent, it's kind of like other people don't realize how fucking cool Counter-Strike is and how fucking cool the professional scene is. But yeah, before we get into CS and how cool Counter-Strike is, um, what is your favorite piece of content to do and why? So it might be, this is a pretty open question, so it's quite difficult to get a specific answer. But do you like, for example, podcasts more than you do writing, or do you prefer writing because it feels therapeutic or whatever? So if you could do one piece of content only, whether it be writing, podcasts, videos, streams, whatever, being a host, I guess, counts as well, until the end of your life, just one of those things, which one would you choose and why?
So we're creating a world where it doesn't matter about how, like, because I mean, currently, video is king and writing is dead. But if
Yeah,
I could just choose and none of that stuff mattered,
yeah.
it would 100% be like just writing. I think writing is beautiful, um, like for me. So I like the idea of writing. That would be my choice.
Okay, okay. It's a respectful one. It's probably a pretty random thing to ask as well, but I think I'm the person that's interested in stuff like that. So we are gonna get into Counter-Strike right now, and the way that I usually kick things off with this conversation, and it's something we discussed with both Anders and Duncan, is because we all love Counter-Strike, but I want to ask you, what makes you love Counter-Strike? What is your favorite thing about Counter-Strike? What is the thing that lights a spark inside of you when you think about Counter-Strike? What's your favorite part about all of this?
I just like watching people wreck other people and shoot them in the head. I mean, sorry, that was just too. I mean, that is the truth of it. First off, like I just like that. But I think that I can't even better that. That is I just like watching other people just be better and shoot
Okay.
people, and it's just fun. But there is also
Yeah.
what I do like. If let's go into this properly, there is a level to CS that I think people don't really appreciate, where it is like chess. Um,
Sure.
Chess with virtual guns, right? I kind
Yeah.
of do like the mind games that come into play, the strategic setup that you've got to follow, like the amounts of like, and this is something that I've always said, like people don't understand when they watch CS for the first time, the fact that like you know that if you throw a particular util, you got to use this angle, you got to change this, certain smokes
Sure.
will land chat. Like I like the amount of like forethought that goes into it, because I think in even a real life situation, if you had 5 guys running around with guns, like similar sort of concept exists, right? There is, I mean, it's nothing like real life, but there is that amount of, there has to be a little bit of like problem solving, and that's what I like
Sure.
about it.
Sure. No, no. I wanted to make a really bad joke there, but there is that thing, because I know you're actually into shooting, right?
Yeah,
There's
in real
that.
life.
Yeah, there's that thing called, of course, sports in designated areas for it, but there's tactical shooting, right? And in tactical shooting, this is one of the main purposes, is knowing how to move around, when you can actually run, when you can sprint, when you can shoot in a certain way and whatnot. So I guess in that sense there is something similar. That is it is a nice answer. It's actually a reference that I like making myself a lot of the time. It kind of feels like Counter-Strike, it's weird because on one hand you enjoy, I guess, the fact that it's a really skill-based game, and as you said, you just wreck people, and sometimes you can be the dumbest person in the world, but if you're better, you're better. But then if you go a little bit higher when it comes down to the level, then it really becomes like chess. So my next question, you said that you've always sucked at video games, but has there been a part of you, a little part of you, that has gone, you know what, I really want to become good at this game. I really want to grind Counter-Strike and become really good at Counter-Strike, or you're content enough with seeing other people wrek some
No,
other
because
people?
I'd love to. I would love to get good. I think the thing about CS though is you have to have the right teammates around you and the right people around you as well
Okay.
to make that happen, right? Um, I love the tactician side. I do think my issue is I love watching pros, and then I watch the way pros are playing, and then I immediately just try go into game and do the same setups, and obviously like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
If you don't have Manasi playing with you, that setup's not going to work. Um, but there is always like that part of me where I'm like, whenever like we have a break in like work, that I'm like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna grind and get good.
Mm.
And then I never get good, and then we go back to work, so it's fine.
Okay, yeah, that pretty much explains my life as well. In Counter-Strike. Then we can get into getting into broadcasting now. My data, or my data is Wikipedia's data, states that you started actually working events as a host, because as you said, you started writing your blog to try and, I guess, spread awareness about esports and make it a cool thing in South Africa. You did start being a broadcast talent as well. So around 2016 was the first event that you participated in. As it is 2016. Don't look at me like that. I have it on the second monitor. It's Telkom DGL Masters 2016 final as a host.
2016. Holy shit, that's almost like 10 years ago. That's what was
Yeah.
shocking me. Yeah, so I mean, I don't hide this. I couldn't care less. I'd never done broadcast work before.
Okay.
This Telkom thing happened. Telkom was the big telecoms thing, and basically they had a PR company and some corporate bigwigs who went, "Ooh, there's a lot of men. We need a woman."
Right.
That was it. And I was very lucky. The PR at the time, she found me through my blog and through the fact that I was at all these events, because I was at this point I was also making like really bad interviews on my smartphone for YouTube. Those have all been deleted because they're that bad. But I was trying to do videos, and she found me and she was like, "Listen, is this something you'd like to do?" And I was like, "I don't know if I can. I don't know, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever." And she was like, "Well, we need a girl." She didn't lie. She just said, "So if you want to do it, the job's yours." And I still said, "Oh, I don't know if I can do the job." And she was like, "It's fine. We just need a girl." Uh,
Sure.
so it was a little bit of gender bias, but I just went, "Okay, cool. Do I get free tickets to Rage?" Because that's where the event was going to be. They were like, "You get free tickets and we're going to pay you and we'll give you lunch." And I was like, "Freaking sold. I'll be there." Uh, and that was how I got my first gig.
And how was that? How was the entire experience? In general, by the way,
Absolutely terrible.
yeah. Were you a really introverted person before that? Like, how
In
have you had any being in front of the camera experience before that?
No in front of the camera experience. uh, had a very specific idea of what I was supposed to look. So I'm like the most chilled human you'll ever meet. Like I live in baggy clothes and leggings and sneakers. That's
Sure.
my vibe. I can obviously dress up when I need to, but I'm not gonna be in a skin tight dress with high heels. It's just not my look.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, esports was still that like very corporate suit and tie thing, because that's what we were seeing online. So I went out and bought like all these beautiful, beautiful cocktail dresses and high heels, none of which I was comfortable in. So that was the first thing, is on stage I was super uncomfortable because I didn't know how to move. Plus, you've now put an in-ear in, which I've never had to like listen to someone
Mm-hmm.
talk to me while I'm trying to like talk. One thing to do it on like TeamSpeak, that's chilled, but like it's a whole other thing when there's like cameras and now there's an audience and there's people, and I was so nervous and it was so terrible. When I look back, it was just I was so bad. But it was super fun, right? Like I was just having the best time doing this weird and wonderful thing. I was so bad. That job, I did the Counter-Strike and the Dota, and I was so bad at the Dota. Um, and you're also like working with players who have also never been on stage,
Sure.
never been in front of a camera. So it was very messy. But it was tons of fun. And obviously then I worked with alongside Redeye, and after that he was like, "Oh, like I can get you some more work if you put some effort in." I thought he was lying. I just went, "Whatever, dude." And it was a couple of months later, I just really hated my job, and I was like, "Okay, cool, let's try." And sat with me on Discord, and just I used to upload videos and then like practice videos, and he would tell me how crap they were, time and time again. And then eventually got me a gig, which I've since found out, ironically, I actually now know that he didn't get me a gig. He turned the gig down and told them to hire me instead.
Right. So in a way, he did get you a gig, I guess. Was it? Was
He
that
gave me
the?
his gig.
Was
He
that the?
gave me his gig.
Right. Yeah. Oh, was that the Samsung Galaxy Championship or whatever? Which is pretty much is the next thing that you did. It was like 1 year later in 2017.
No, so that was I was doing a lot of South African esports after the telecom thing,
Yeah.
because I think everyone kind of jumped onto the like, "Ah, she's a girl." So Samsung Galaxy was a South African one. There was a lot of South African stuff. The first international gig I did was at Gamescom. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I can't even remember when. There was some sort of payment platform, and I can't remember the name now. And they sponsored G2 at the time, and
Okay.
Body and Apex were with G2. So what they did is Body went to Gamescom, and they chose a team of 4 players from the crowd, each of them, and then you played on stage. Body was your captain or Apex was your captain, and that was the first CS gig I did, and my first international gig.
Sure.
ESL ran it, so it was more like a fan thing. And I remember that the casting duo for that was Harry.
Okay.
Sorry, not Harry. It was Hugo.
Right.
Hugo and a guy called Tombers who now commentates
Oh
Valorant.
yeah, I know Tombus. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Hugo and Tombers were the duo casting the Counter-Strike, and that was my first gig. I still have a picture of me with Body and Apex. I've joked with Apex in the past about it. So that was like my first international gig that I did.
That's actually really awesome, by the way. It's for your
Yeah, it
first
was pretty cool.
international gig to involve Body and Apex is quite a thing. At the time, because you said you hated your work, by the way, what did you do on the side? Because I assume you've been writing all this time, like your blog doesn't stop, right? It's still going, but you said that you were working
The
something else.
the blog is still happening, but I was working at like a marketing company.
Okay.
It was like a marketing startup, and I just didn't like it. Like it was also that time of like the startup culture
Hmm.
where everyone was like, yeah, all about startups and the grind and wearing your polo neck, and it just seemed really dumb.
Not your cup of
I
tea.
was gonna use it. Yeah, I was gonna use a terrible word there, but yeah, I thought everyone there was kind of dumb, so that was it.
Okay, yeah, dumb is fine. You know what?
Yeah.
You can use whatever word you want. In the end of the day, I can excuse myself and say I'm Bulgarian. I don't know what she said, even if I
Oh,
did
there
know.
we
So
go.
I can
There we go.
always
I
play the
can do that.
Bulgarian card, and we're gonna be all right.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, from that point on, I guess the weird, not weird. It's actually quite cool. But the interesting thing for me is the fact that, as you said, you started working a lot in Counter-Strike, but in the meantime you were doing a lot of other games as well, right? You were doing Dota, you were doing PUBG, and PUBG is something that you've been doing for many years now, I guess, as well. Was all of that at the start influenced by the fact that in South Africa there wasn't too many tournaments and there wasn't too much work to be done, so you're like, you know what, I'm gonna be open to doing other stuff as well?
No, I was told if I wanted to work overseas that there wasn't space for me in Counter-Strike.
All right.
That CS talent was pretty much locked up and there weren't opportunities. So what I should do is do these other games and get experience, and then in time I could get into CS. Uh, I wish I hadn't listened to that. I think it was absolute bullshit. But I went, okay. And I started doing whatever gigs came my way for the experience. Obviously, PUBG was in 2018. I loved that. I still do PUBG work.
Yeah.
I still love that community. But I was doing everything. I did so many Nintendo games, Splatoon, Smash Bros. I've done Tekken.
You did Overwatch as well, right?
I did Overwatch for a
Yeah.
while. I've done Valorant. I I even did e-golf at one point.
Ego.
Which is like, yeah, at Made in Denmark, there's like big golfing tournaments. It pissed with rain the whole time. They set up a tent at the golfing tournament, and e-golf was happening there. So like, I have done everything. Crossfire in China, the weird like old school CS ripoff. If someone wanted me to, if there was a gig, I took the gig, right? Like I just
Yeah.
wanted to. Yeah, I even did Clash Royale at one. I was a shoutcaster for Clash Royale. I shoutcasted Fortnite. Um, so yeah, like I just took whatever. So if someone said he has a gig, because in my mind, the more I did, the more people would see that I'm versatile and I'm
Yeah.
hardworking, and then someone would give me an opportunity in CS. What I didn't realize at the time, this was what I'd kind of been told. There were a lot of politics behind the scenes that set that situation up, which I'm not going to go into,
Hmm.
but it was wrong because no one in CS is looking outside of CS for talent,
Yeah.
right? And at the time, I was put into that position for various reasons, but over time I got really frustrated. I love all the work I've done. I've met incredible people. I think that it's helped me be better at my job.
Hmm.
But there reached a point about 3 years ago where I was like, why am I like it's F off hard to jump between games. Like it
Hmm.
is so hard because you don't know the community. Other games do not have HLTV and Reddit threads and all of that shit.
Yeah.
Like they literally have nothing. So you have to spend hours on like X and Instagram and like TikTok trying to find players and understand who they are and what the history is and like find results and do that whole thing. And like you're constantly having to jump into a new game, figure out how it works, what the meta is. And like it just was so overwhelming. Then you put all your heart and soul into that, you do the events and then you leave and you never go back, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was like 3 years ago, I also, while all of this is happening, like, I'm gonna be in so much trouble. Like the only esport I'm watching is Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
So like if you ask me at this point, if you ask me anything about international CS, I can tell you who's casting what tournaments, who came first, who came freaking 12th, like what that game looked like,
Yeah.
all of that, because that was what I loved. So it was like 3 years ago, I just went, you know what the hell am I doing? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't want to just be jumping from thing to thing. If I can't work in the game that I love, I'm going to leave. And at about the same time that happened, I moved to a new agency and I said to them, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. So either we focus on CS work or fuck it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then they reached out to a bunch of TOs who I'd worked with in other games and said, actually, she wants to do Counter-Strike. And they all came back and were like, what? I didn't know that. Which was a little bit of a shock to me because I was like, oh, but I thought that had been communicated to you. Again,
Yeah.
that's water under the bridge. But from there, Black Molly gave me an opportunity. ESL gave me an opportunity. And then I was just really lucky that a couple of people who had worked with me gave me the chances to kind of show what I was made of.
I get it. I get it. It's a really weird limbo. I guess when you're trying to, because it doesn't feel at the time when you're trying to get into something, it makes complete sense, I guess, to believe that the more you do, the more you're gonna be recognized, right? Are you that type of a person? Do you, because from my perspective, it kind of looks like that's the case. Are you that type of a person that just goes into something and believes as soon as you do the work, things are gonna work out, and if things don't work out, you're gonna hold yourself accountable that you didn't do the right amount of work? Is that how you approach things?
And it's a terrible way to approach things in this industry because
Yeah.
I've always believed that hard work trumps everything, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have talent, just work harder.
Mm.
Because hard work beats talent every time. The more work you put in, the harder you work, the more people will notice you. And hard work doesn't necessarily mean lots of work. It just means when you do certain things, you put 110% effort into them, right?
Yeah.
And you constantly like bring as much as you can to the table. And I do still believe this at my core that like you just need to work hard. Like you need to just be a hard worker. Unfortunately, that's not how the real world works. Sometimes you can do all the work and it doesn't matter because whatever's happening behind the scenes is happening behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
And like in any business and industry, there's all sorts of weird shit happening. But I am someone who's always just been like, if you just put your head down and work, the work should speak for itself. That's kind of how I feel. And if the work speaks for itself, eventually people can't ignore you, right?
Yeah, if you're, I guess that counts. I think that counts if you become exceptional at what you do, though, right? Because as you pointed out, it's really difficult to isolate yourself from all the talks that are happening behind the scenes and all of the other things. But if you are the best at something, if you're the undisputable number one, then people can't deny it, right? If you're, let's say, Cristiano Ronaldo in football, people can't deny you're one of the greatest. They can make an argument that Messi's better than you, but no one can argue that you didn't deserve to actually play in big teams, right? Is where we're getting with this. What is, because you said that in your mind, those couple years of going through that crazy limbo of work in different games was a little bit weird, I guess, and it didn't make you feel at your best at the end. What is, regardless of it, I would assume there was something good about it. The best thing that came out of all of this. What was it could be a list of things that you were able to learn, or a couple things that you learned to do better because of all that time, because there definitely will be at least one or two positives out of that entire couple years period where you just did 20,000 different games.
So to be clear, I don't ever look back at that period negatively. Like I don't think it was a waste of time. I don't
Yeah.
hate what I did. I'm really proud of the work I did. I just realized that my passion lay with CS.
Okay.
That was where I wanted to be. And lots of people will tell you as a host, you should do different games because you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. But I realized that I'm the most passionate when I'm working on Counter-Strike. It's the one game
Mm-hmm.
that allows me to also be myself. And that was kind of it. But in terms of the time that I was working on so many other games, the first thing is you obviously just meet so many other people
Okay.
with different. same interests because we're all still involved in esports, but like different interests, different like their game is different. So many players with like just incredible stories and very different stories as to how they got to where they are. Those were always going to be like the standouts for me, is the people and the stories that I got to discover along the way. And then I was also really lucky because I think across the board I've worked with some of the best broadcast talents across multiple games. Like I've worked with Ryan Hart, who's probably like, if people are watching and they're Counter-Strike fans, they might not know this. Ryan Hart is probably one of like the best fighting games, not only commentators, but players of all time. I got to work
Okay.
with him. You know, like I've been able to have that experience. I've worked with a guy called Kylaris, who was from StarCraft, now PUBG, who's been a desk host before most of us even knew what a desk host was, and has so much broadcast experience in that regard. Pansy she's from Counter-Strike, but I got to work with her in PUBG. Pansy's like my ultimate freaking, she's just goals. So like that was
Yeah.
really cool getting to watch her. Old school people remember D-Man. I got to work with him. These are all like legends
Mm.
of they built the foundation of esports as we know it. And I had that chance to like work with them. And now as well, what's interesting is there's also a lot of like young and new talents in different games that I've been on broadcasts with. So like there's a guy called Desertu, who's probably one of the top commentators in Rainbow Six Siege. We worked on Overwatch together. I mean,
Okay.
mental. There's Yeah, I mean, I can go on and on and on, but there's just so many different people that Tombers, like I've just had the opportunity to work with like really old school talents and learn
Yeah.
from them, and then new talent and watch them rise. So I think you learn from everyone, and I do think that helps you be better at your job in the long run and just better at life, really.
Yeah, I guess it kind of feels like you just went through the ultimate training camp where you just get the best things that you can apply to Counter-Strike world from different games, and then you come into Counter-Strike and you're like, yes, I've collected all the pieces of Exodia, I'm ready for all of this. But I guess after that you come back into CS at let's say around 2020 2021, and you start doing exclusively and primarily Counter-Strike, and you have been doing majority 99% Counter-Strike up to today. Now you've worked on a couple majors, you've worked on a couple LAN events, you're traveling a lot of the time. So I guess you've had a little bit of time to build your own idea of what you want your work to look like. So for all of the people that are looking at the broadcast but that don't know a lot about what's going on behind the scenes, can you explain to me what are the most challenging parts? Well, not maybe not challenging, but what are the things that a host needs to take and an interviewer needs to take into account in order to do a good job in your eyes?
So I think for a host, like the thing that your job is to steer the ship, right?
Sure.
So your job is to make sure that the ship there's a very clear path to a grand final, and it starts all the way back in play-ins, right? And your job as the host or the hosts is to steer that ship all the way to the grand finals. So there's a technical aspect of understanding when to hit marks, when to make sure advertised stuff runs, when to kill a conversation, because sometimes analysts might be going on too much and you need to move them on, when to let a conversation breathe, all of that, and to hit those marks, steer that ship. And then obviously also the most important thing is to create the story, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's the funnel. You start up here and then we slowly just want to get you down to this point, which is that grand finals. And I think that like that is the host's job, is just to create that environment that allows us to funnel to the point, but also creates a space where production and the analysts and everyone can trust in you to do that. That's probably the most important one as well.
Do you feel like do you feel like you actually like that amount of responsibility that comes your way to look at the end product and be like, if everyone's done their job perfectly and the end product is good, that means that I've done my job perfectly because I've made people comfortable on the broadcast?
Yes. The problem with that is I have a terrible tendency to take everything on myself. So
Sure.
if like one of my analysts is having a bad day, I think I've had to learn to not do this. Like then it suddenly is like, oh well, this is my responsibility to
Mm-hmm.
make you have a better day so that you do a better job on the show. I can't be Someone once told me like it's not my job to be their mom.
Yeah.
And it's not my job to like if someone's unhappy about a call time, I used to be the person that would then go and like talk to the talent managers and be like, oh, can we change their call time? And again, someone said to me, listen, like, you can't be coming here. If someone doesn't want to wake up early, like, you can't be the person saying, hey, they don't want to wake up early, because then people get cross with you, you know?
Yeah.
But I used to take that on because I really, like, if someone was unhappy, I took it personally. Like, I was like, if everyone is happy and they have a good time, that's the most important thing. I've got a little bit better now at being like, it's not actually my problem if you don't want to wake up early. So that's different. So, like, in terms of responsibility, I don't really feel it with the show because I think we're all a team and we all
Sure.
carry a level of responsibility. Before I used to get myself, I think would work myself into such a level of anxiety that it'd probably make myself sick, being so concerned about whether or not, like, people were having a good time at work. But like I said, I've now learned that it's not my problem, actually. We're all there to do the same job.
I guess this is the mature way of being an empathic person, right? And realizing there's ways to show empathy without ruining yourself. Which,
I still struggle. Like, don't get me wrong,
yeah,
I still
okay,
want to get involved. Like, I always feel like, oh, I should say something or I should speak
okay.
up now. Like, it's hard for me sometimes to not say something and to shut up. Especially if I, like,
Especially when
yeah,
you know people are not going to be there shaking the car while we're inside of it.
yeah, exactly.
um it's I guess leading to, and I purposefully wanted to leave the South African scene for last here, because I do think that across this conversation we've caught up on a pretty clear pattern, that is, you do show a lot of empathy, right? And you do love putting yourself out there and trying to lift things up and help things when you think that they deserve to be helped, right? So, well, you said that that was the case with the South African scene, and that's why you started actually writing those blogs. So just introduce me to what is the South African scene looking like right now, because you started writing the blogs many years ago, and you've from my understanding, you've actually put in a lot of work in trying to make things work a little bit better. But it's still, to me, it's always been a really funny one, because I don't feel like South Africa, maybe bar geographically, it doesn't feel like it's too isolated, right? Because time zones are all right, like it when you compare them to Europe. Most people speak good English. There's a lot of big brands that I guess are positioned in there, so it doesn't feel like the scene should be as isolated as it actually is. But from the outside, it still kind of feels like it is. Why do you think that is?
So if you'd asked me this, what, like in 2016 when I started, I would have had a very different opinion. But now I am older and wiser. So one, geographically, we are just way too far away from everyone. So
Mm-hmm.
we can't play the best in the world. The only people we can play are people in South Africa. That's the first thing. So we are like, because of the ping situation, we cannot ever branch out of our group.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the time difference is almost identical to Europe, which I know blows people's minds all the time, but like, we're recording this, it is noon where I am, which means it's 11 a.m. CET. Like,
It's
just to
it's
give you an
noon
idea.
where I am as well.
Yeah, same time. So, like, I know that
Yeah.
freaks people out, but I don't know
Yeah.
how it
Whoa,
works,
this is
but
how
there we are.
geography works. This is how
There,
meridians work. Oh my goodness.
so there we are, and so there's no time difference. English is one of our 11 official languages, so that's cool.
Yeah,
The
that's
issue in
crazy.
South Africa, yeah, the issue in South Africa is we have a horrific past, which people
Okay.
know about. Obviously, apartheid, where we racially discriminated against one group of people, and our government chose to cut them off from access to anything, education, running water. People of color were treated horrifically badly,
Okay.
and the the horrible situation that then occurred is in 1994, apartheid comes to an end, and we have one of the most robust constitutions. We have huge amounts of freedoms, but we are still fighting a, many years of oppression. And what that oppression has done is it's created a situation where so many South Africans live in below the breadline and in abject poverty because generation after generation after generation was denied access to what we would consider just like basic rights. Okay.
Sure.
So, and then what happens is now someone, a person of color my age who's been to university and has a university degree is earning a salary, but that salary has to now support their mom and their grandmother and their great grandmother who didn't have the ability and weren't given the rights to just a basic education,
Mm-hmm.
right? So financially, we have that situation. Because of that, the socioeconomic situation means that having access to fiber internet and a PC is reserved, and when I say a PC, I'm talking about a gaming PC, and I know a bunch of South Africans will fight me about this, but I don't care what you say. It is reserved for the middle to upper middle class,
Okay.
which is a very small percentage of the population.
Yeah.
So what that means is now, so one, owning a gaming PC and having access to fiber, which allows you to ultimately play CS, right, online with your friends, is limited to a small group of people. But in that small group of people, even a smaller amount are interested in Counter-Strike. You have this tiny community of people, and it is why we don't have servers for different games here, because there's hardly much of a playing base. So now if you have this tiny group of people playing competitive Counter-Strike, and the only people you can play against are this group, you don't get better, right? You kind of, you have a little bubble,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll play in the bubble, and that's great. And there was a time where, and this was 2016, 2017, where brands were throwing a shit ton of money into competitive Counter-Strike. And it did start to look like it was growing. And then what happened is our best players left. That was the Bravado team
Yeah.
became ATK, obviously JT now Complexity. Our best players left. But in the same time when they were leaving, and this is something, it's esports 101, we've all seen it. It's that immediate gold rush that happened in Europe many years ago, where a bunch of people who didn't know what the hell they were doing, but just saw dollar signs, all jumped in.
Yeah.
There was a lot of cash being thrown around, a lot of huge mistakes happening, businesses coming in and then disappearing and not paying people. So we had that like weird, the bubble burst, if you
Mm-hmm.
like. But now our top players have left, the bubbles burst, and we have this tiny group of players who can't get any better because they're just playing against themselves. And so the scene hasn't grown here. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, I think it's declined even more so. And it's unfortunate, but that is the situation we find ourselves in. And lots of people will ask me, how do we build CS in South Africa? But my answer is always going to be, until we can bring down the cost of access to data and technology, we're never going to be able to build it. Like that is, we have to change a socio-economic situation, and I don't know how we do that as a tiny group of Counter-Strike players.
Yeah. That.
But lots of people, yeah, lots of people disagree with me on this. I have a very strong opinion about it
Yeah.
after years of watching. That's what I kind of think. At the same time, I also just think that it is one of those situations where there are a lot of bad actors in the scene as well, like lots of
Sure.
snake oil salesmen. Because it is an emerging scene, and I chose 2 years ago, I used to, like you said, I used to be so hell bent on like building the local scene.
Mm-hmm.
And about 2 years ago, I went, well, you know what, actually, it's not my circus, not my monkeys. Pulled myself out and just focused on what I could do and what I could do well in my job, and in Counter-Strike. And so I haven't had a lot more involvement in the last 2 years. I've kind of distanced myself a bit from it. And unfortunately, what's quite sad is I think a lot of the players who went overseas, the TCs, the JTs, the
Yeah.
Sonics, similar situation. I think they've distanced themselves a bit as well.
And you can understand why, I guess.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't fix it. Like the issue is so much bigger than us, and we know that.
Doesn't it feel? Because I think when it comes down to, obviously every country has its own history and things are strongly individual for different countries, but it feels like most of the time the I don't want to say the blame, but maybe the problem shouldn't be even looked for at the players, right? Even if you do have good players, as you pointed out, if the country and the scene in the country and the community aren't built in a way that those good players can actually be motivated and they can be given the resources, if you will, to actually develop their potential, then they will just go away, and that's not going to develop South African Counter-Strike, right? And the reason I'm saying this is that that's what's happening, I think, with many small countries or smaller countries. South Africa isn't a small country, but many more isolated or smaller communities, countries around the world, right? And it feels like, as you pointed out, maybe the reason is a lot deeper and it's a lot bigger, and it's up to a lot of the people that are actually on the business and management side of things to make some moves to actually allowed the players to have room to grow and to have the safe environment to grow, and then esports can thrive. So esports in the end of the day is business, right? It's a pretty niche, well, not as niche now, but it is a business. So you need the business to be businessing in order for the players to be playing, if you get what I mean.
100%. And like for me, another thing that South African Counter-Strike went wrong back in 2016, 2017, when those brands were throwing these massive prize pools at events with big stages and stuff, I was one of them that was standing up being like, this is amazing. Like, look
Yeah,
at us. And it's the mentality of if you build it, they will come. But what we didn't do was develop the foundation. The grassroots level wasn't there, right? So what we did is we skipped a bunch of steps. We went
yeah,
from playing in the basement for mouse pads to this massive stage with like $100,000 prize pool. And then there's like this whole bit in the middle. And then players were like, well, I want salaries and organizations want this. And then suddenly all this money was being pummeled in. And 2 years later, there's no return. So all the money gets sucked out. It's a very similar situation to what I think we're going to see very soon in global Counter-Strike. And that
sure.
was something that I always like to say is we were crawling as South African CS. We were crawling along. And the next thing we were running in a marathon. Like we missed learning how to walk.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of how I've always tried to use it as an example. And we need to go back to walking before we'll be able to run again.
Yeah, and have you ever thought about, this is probably the closing stages of the South African scene conversation, but have you ever thought about organizing events and actually trying to start your own organization to some extent in South Africa, or you've given up on that a long time ago?
So I did a bunch of events in 2017, 2018, 2019, just before
Okay.
COVID. And during COVID as well, some stuff. I never wanted to run an org.
Hmm.
I think that there's a conflict in running an org and being in broadcast. It's just personal opinion.
Sure.
So I never wanted to do that. But I did a bunch of events. I did an event in, I think it was 2018, called the ASUS Valkyrie Challenge, which was I found 2 all-women Counter-Strike teams in South Africa. Did like a show match where people could come. We did like a full-on, like it was like going to an event to watch them play because I wanted to showcase women's Counter-Strike a bit. I did a very similar event I worked with a team of people. I worked with, it wasn't just me, but we did a tournament where it was all about like tier 2 CS in South Africa. So not the top dogs, like finding these teams that were unknown and creating a tournament for them with a big LAN final.
Hmm.
We did that, which was like the Matrix Challenges something or other. And then I did a host of like sort of events like that where I was just trying to showcase CS and trying to showcase players and uplift like women and tier 2, tier 3 players and try and grow the scene in my own way. And I loved it and it's tons of fun, but it's also it's hard and it's time consuming and there is no money to be made in those events. So you have to have a lot of time and a lot of your own cash to make it happen.
Okay, I was just interested in all of that because you don't
Yeah.
strike me as the person that wouldn't have that thought cross their mind
Oh
at a
yeah.
single
I
point.
still think about it. Like I still have
Yeah.
event ideas that pop up all the time. It's about finding time and getting the right partners to make them happen. Like
It
I
are there
I
good
write them down.
partners in South Africa for building up a sustainable esports ecosystem, in your opinion?
I think so. I do think that there are corporate sponsors
Okay.
who desperately want to help grow it. I just think that the expectations of the community are totally inflated right now.
Okay.
Um, I think the idea that everyone needs to get paid a similar, like the fact that there is an idea that a broadcast talent must be paid the same as someone who's commentated a major, or the fact that players feel that they should have salaries when there's one LAN a year. Like, I think those expectations are unfortunately just way too high.
Hmm.
There are corporate sponsors who would happily come in and help and who want to help, but sometimes when they do, the expectation is just so extreme and they kind of go, okay, hold on, we can't give you that. And then sometimes the community goes, well, then we don't want you here at all. As opposed to going, okay, how can we find a way to make this work with what we have so that everyone walks out of this with a good return versus just being way too demanding because of what you see on Twitch is happening in Europe or the States, which you just can't, you're not comparing apples with apples, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. With that being said, we're gonna move into, and this is more of a, I guess, added up to that entire. We're doing a discovery game right now. We're discovering sides of your character as a person. So we were talking about being empathic. We were talking about hard work as well, which is what we're leaning back into right now. Uh, is it difficult? Because obviously, I know it is, but how? In what way is it actually difficult to find satisfaction in being a freelance broadcast talent and content creator in esports? Because this is, I think, one of the more less discussed topics, I guess, if you will, amongst people, and one of the things that most of the time broadcast talent would discuss between themselves, right? But it wouldn't be voiced as much. So how do you feel productive doing freelance work and not knowing, for example, when you're gonna get hired for the next event, keeping your days full? Because you did say that you are a person that likes being busy, right? So how do you do that in esports and balance it with a sustainable, I guess, mental health, which is on a decent level, while having that insecurity about freelance work?
I think the best advice I got was from Thorin, which was just before Feed the Troll started, which was like, find your own thing, a thing that you
Sure.
own. Because I had like all these ideas of what I wanted to do on a desk and what I imagined a show looking like and like what I wanted to try. And by no means do I think I'm right. I don't know if half of it could work. It could fail miserably, but like I
Sure.
wanted to be able to try it. But unfortunately, when you get hired for events, you can't just do whatever the hell you want, right? You have to work within the confines of the broadcast. And he was the one who said, well, just do your own thing then. Like start your own thing, show people what it is you would want to do. And that was where Feed the Trolls was born. And I think Feed the Trolls has been a big one for me in realizing that like it doesn't the world doesn't stop and end with working on esports events.
Sure.
I think that there is so much value that can be found in other things and in creating and being able to like find ways to do different things. Like I obviously do Feed the Trolls, which I love, and I'm so proud of that. And it was my idea that I took to him, and I love what we do there. But some episodes completely bomb because I think it's a cool topic and no one else does, and that's just how that goes, right? Um, but then on the other side, like, I do Sell Me This Pro with B Dog, which is
Yeah.
like just focusing on players that he thinks are interesting in tier 2 and tier 3, and I find B Dog really interesting, so I enjoy that show. It doesn't have a massive audience because a lot of people, it turns out, do not give a shit about tier 2 or tier 3, but we love doing it and I love doing it, and I think it's a really cool, I just think it's a cool show that I enjoy doing with my friends. So like that for me is where I kind of find joy, is creating stuff that I'm proud of.
Hmm.
And again, like just not, I think as a freelancer you can get yourself caught up in like a really ugly world of like wheeling and dealing and politics and why is no one hiring me or what did I do wrong, and so for me I just focus in on my work and try and give that all my energy, um and that tends to, I think, help me find balance, also because then I'm really busy and I don't have time to think about anything else.
Okay. Is there a, I guess there's a fun way of asking this, but is there a way to complete your sense to be productive in a day? Would you say that you are capable of doing that? And how does one full day, in the end of which you sit there and you're like, you know what, I'm proud of what I did today, I'm happy, I did everything that I could have, what does one day of yours that ends up giving you that sense in the end of it look like?
So for me, it's like I have to have been to gym, which I've been really bad with lately. So I'm bad like
Sure.
training. So like a little bit of focus on myself. Um, and then I always write to-do lists. So I just have like a list of things that I want to do during the course of the day. And I
Okay.
just, if I can get through that list, I'm really happy. Um, but yeah, like, do you ever get everything you want done in a day? Because I don't.
No,
So
no. I
yeah.
actually gave up. I gave up on writing things like a year ago. I was like, there's a lot of things to be done, so I'll just do stuff. And I know there's still gonna be something left for the other day, so I just do it and don't think about it.
I have like a strong opinion on like if you make a commitment, you have to stick to it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, especially if I'm in an event, like I have committed to doing Feed the Trolls. Like we try and do it weekly, but it's obviously dependent on topics and guests.
Yeah.
But even when I'm traveling, like I take the gear with to do the show.
Mhm.
That's important to me. I've made that commitment. Like those sort of things. I think it's just trying to stick to the commitments, not necessarily commitments you've made to other people, but commitments you've made to yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like so sometimes I'll be like, prioritize this. Like today, this is important. Like you do need to go and buy groceries. And then and then if I tick that off my list, I'm like, yay, look at me being an adult.
Yeah, you know what? I'm probably the worst person to talk to about that because I am I'm prioritizing work a lot. So if it's, let's say, a show or whatever, then that's gonna be done. Or if it's an article or a cast, obviously is completely understandable. But if it is things like go to the grocery store, those are the things that I will compromise with. If it's
Me too.
yeah, do the laundry, go to the grocery. If it's something that doesn't harm other people and I can live with, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do that other thing. I might as well go to the gym. It doesn't matter that I have no food and I haven't eaten all day, and I'm not gonna go and buy anything. I'll still go to the gym because I prioritize it. So I am the worst person to talk to about balance in life in that sense, because I do tend to prioritize some things over others. The way that I want to end this, Sam, is with a conversation because we barely talked about Counter-Strike. Well, I mean, we talked about Counter-Strike, but from the perspective, from your professional perspective, I want to talk a little bit about the state of women's Counter-Strike right now. Because obviously there was a really interesting start of the year with the VRS being introduced and Imperial Valkyries getting a lot of opportunities to go at tier LAN events. Made me happy as well because I finally got to see a Bulgarian be at tier LAN events. It had to happen through the female through a female team and for this guy to be a coach. But how do you feel about the state of women's CS right now? Because I think it's a really weird dynamic that is being created right now with a lot of the organizations exiting. Obviously now ESO Impact has started, which is a good thing, right? And there's a lot of cool teams. There actually is some newer organizations entering, but yeah, how do you feel about that entire story with Imperial getting all of those invites and playing some events? What do you make of it? Do you think it's a positive thing? Do you think it's a negative thing?
So I've done a show. I'm just gonna do like a little self promo. Sorry.
Yeah.
We did a Feed the Trolls recently with Volga, who was the original. She put together Enigma Galaxy, who's now Imperial
You know what?
Valkyries.
We're gonna give a shout out to that. I'm gonna promo it as well because Vilga was the first female player guest on the TED Talk as well, and she's a really good friend of mine, and I
Yay!
admire Vilga a
Yeah,
lot. So we're gonna give it a shout out.
I
The Feed the Trolls episode is gonna
yeah.
be below.
Volga is incredible, and she's a good friend of mine. So we
Yeah.
spoke about a lot of this there, but one of the things that I learned during that conversation was that like we all agree the VRS system's a bit scuffed at the moment,
Sure.
and the way Imperial Valkyries got their invites is there's question marks. But the truth of it is, if I got invited to play at IEM Cato, I'd freaking go. I don't care. Like I'd probably be, you know what I mean? We'd all say
Yeah.
yes. No
Yeah.
one's gonna turn down the invite. So good on them. And what Volga mentioned to me is the resultant knock-on effect is that one, her team, who's not Imperial Valkyries, but is a women's team. She obviously coaches. Sorry, she's the IGL for
Yeah.
the
NIP
NIP
Impact.
women's team. She said they're getting more opportunities to play with better teams.
Mhm.
They're being invited to more tournaments. They're getting more invites to those events. They're having better practices. They're having better scrims. So there was a positive that came from this.
Sure.
And she said it's not just them. Other women's teams are getting more invites to these cash cups. There's been a lot of these online tournaments that they're now starting to invite the women's teams, which is what we want, believe it or not. Like no one wants ESL Impact to be the only event that women's CS plays. I want women teams to play in the CCTs of the world and the Yallas and the things like that. We want to see the women's teams in the mix. So I think it's really positive. I think Valkyries, there was a positive effect. Obviously, they weren't at the level they needed to be. We all know that. They know
Sure.
that, hell. But they took the opportunity, and I think that the opportunity was good. It put some eyeballs on what's possible. And I hope it motivated more women's teams to be more open to entering the Yellow Campus events of the world or the CCTs. And I hope that we get to see more of them doing that. But that's kind of where I'm at. With regards to some of the organizations pulling out, I think that had a lot to do with how the VRS system worked and the the issue where they were going to have to be pretty. I mean, if you think about it, if you're Navi and you have your main team, an academy team, and now a women's team, at some point you're going to be telling teams they can't play in certain events because of the conflicts of interest. So I can understand why you would pull support. It sucks, but I do actually get it because again, this is business.
Yeah.
So I hope that we can find a way to make this all work and to see where we go. And I hope that we get more women's events. That would be great as well. I think it sucks that ESL Impact's the only one. I know there's a few more that have actually popped up, so I stand to be corrected there. But I think it was good. I think Valkyries, it also opened the door to conversations that had to be had. And we speak about a lot of it on Feed the Trolls. Like, I do think that there was some people that were too sensitive about criticism of the players. We criticize teams. That's what we do. But I also think that there was a lot of people getting a chance to see like how much hate women get when they play CS and maybe changing their perception a bit and going, hey, this is actually like pretty shit and that shouldn't be happening. So yeah, it's a very nuanced discussion, but overall, I think it was really positive. I understand that the situation wasn't the one we all wanted. The VRS system is scuffed, but I do think the positives in that situation outweigh the negatives.
What do you think about the idea? Because I seen a lot of that online, and I actually found out recently that on Apex's Valorant team, there is a woman playing, and the reason I found out is because the coach of this team is Bulgarian. Of course, that's the only way I would find out about something like that. But I was actually really pleasantly surprised because they qualified for VCT, which is the equivalent, I guess, of, if you want to put it in Counter-Strike words, CSGO Pro League, for example. And she is the only female on the team, obviously. But what do you think about that idea? Because I think especially after Imperial's games, a lot of people were really hyped up, especially about 20, right? Because she is individually really cracked. So do you see that happening any time in the future? For example, mixed teams between men and females.
I don't know. So I know that there's like this old school thing because I've spoken to guys about this where they'll be like, oh, you can't have a woman on the team because it just changes the dynamic and causes problems and then girlfriends aren't happy and blah, 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 blah. But one of my best friends who sadly passed away is a CS player called Shaz. She played on international teams, women's teams, but she was also so damn good in South Africa that she was considered one of the best players, which meant she was on some of the best teams in the country.
Sure.
As the only woman. So one of them was a team called Energy, which was always Bravado's like nemesis. She played on Energy with TC, funny enough, who was no longer the coach of Complexity, but when he was playing, he was on a team with Shaz. And we had this conversation and she said there was a few people that questioned her, oh, well, she's a woman. But then she went overseas and she played well. And when she was here, they saw her every night in the server grinding, putting in the freaking work. She could freaking just outshoot half the dudes, right? And she was constantly putting them down. And because of that, she started getting put on teams and she was freaking good. And she said she never ever felt there was some issues, but the better she got, the less it became about her being a woman and it became more about how the hell do we get Shaz on our team. I think that mixed teams can exist if you're good enough. And that's the thing, right? You have to be good enough and you have to be putting in the work. I do think that in time, our women players can get there and will be there. It's just obviously it takes time. And also it takes experience. And to get experience, you need to be playing in more tournaments.
Yeah, I really like that, and I think this is a good way to put an end to the conversation. Actually, I have a bit of a funny story that I think you'd like. I had a similar way of actually opening my eyes to how good women could be in Counter-Strike when I was like maybe 15 or 16 or whatever. And Mimi, she was on the Copenhagen Flames back then. She annihilated me on FaZe. It was a really fun series where Mimi and Petra, that's how Petra used to be, and I was really sad when they switched to Valorant, by the way, because Petra is a really good friend of mine. We met because I was playing Bulgarian 5 stacks and they were playing international 5 stacks. We played 5 consecutive FACEIT maps, fully random against each other. We played a best of 5, all different maps, and they were sick. And I was like, you know what? I am useless as fuck. They're sick. They should be pros. I shouldn't be. That's when I decided, you know what? Maybe no. Well, it wasn't that moment, but I was like, yeah, I'm not cut for that. They're so much better than me. I'm just gonna stick to being a caster. But yeah, those are those moments, and I think this is a good moment to put an end to the conversation. Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming over. We're gonna, you know what? As this has been a simulation of a motivational show, and this is, I literally called it the TED Talk. We're gonna end it with one message that you'd like to send to people. It could be about anything. It could be brush your teeth, whatever. It could be work hard, never give up. It could be brush your teeth. It could be never forget to breathe or whatever. Stage is yours.
Life's too short. Just eat the chocolate today.
Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. That's exactly what I plan on doing after we stop the show. Folks, thank you for
Good job.
watching. Make sure you go and check out what Sam is doing on her channel. She's doing, as we already mentioned a couple times, a lot of cool content. Feed the Trolls with Thorin, Sell Me This Pro with Brandon, and a lot of other cool things. And yeah, follow her on the socials. Sam, thank you once again for coming over. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, we'll see you again very, very soon. And this time, I really promise the next interview is going to be with a player. I promise. I've been promising that for 4 months, by the way, and I've just been doing broadcast talents and journalists and people. Next one is going to be with a player. I promise. I won't tell you who the player is, but is the player playing on a tier 1 team, so you're going to enjoy it. Okay, thank you very much for watching, folks. Have a good one. We'll see you soon. Bye bye.